paraphrase a rather good former Tory Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, I think this is not the end of the beginning. This is really the beginning of the end for the Conservative Party, because talk about, Michelle, revenge is a dish best served cold. You've got to look at this in terms of this psychodrama between Richard Tice, Nigel Farage, the upper echelons of the Reform Party as it is now, and indeed, the people that have joined or defected in recent months. This goes all the way back to the 2019 general election, when Nigel stood down in 317 constituencies, frankly, to deliver Boris Johnson's whacking majority. And the Tories gave Nigel absolutely nothing in return for that. In fact, they sort of danced on his grave.
Saudi Arabia has a different way to keep migrant numbers down.
Many migrant workers will die, in inverted commas. The likely human cost of awarding the 2034 World Cup to Saudi Arabia, of course, they have been awarded that today. And millions of migrants, according to The Guardian, will build the stadiums, transport networks and hotels, largely from the Bangladeshi community, and they're likely to die. Now, of course, this is a problem. It was a problem in Qatar. There are a number of deaths there. Even building that within the last 10 years, they had the sort of number of deaths you'd expect building a stadium, in Victorian Britain, without scaffolding or whatever.
No, it's interesting. These stadiums are going to be built by a lot of it's sort of modern day slavery. They tell the story of a Bangladeshi guy who went there, then his visa was taken off him by his employer, and then he ended up working for food and lodging. He was essentially a slave, and then he died. He had health problems, couldn't get any treatment there, had to borrow money, and he was found dead. So that's essentially modern slavery. So we're going to have all these virtue signalling footballers with their rainbow armbands and rainbow laces taking the knee on stadiums that are built on the bones of slaves. It's just sickening hypocrisy. But also, I'm amazed. 2 million Bangladeshi migrant workers in Saudi Arabia. I can't believe they go to Saudi Arabia to work and have all the issues, potential issues and risks there, when they could just come to the UK and probably make more money in the first week signing on than they do in Saudi Arabia having to work for a living.
Yeah. They always say some people want to see politics not involved in football. Stop holding your World Cups in places where there really is a political thing that needs to be talked about. Do you know what I mean?
£22 billion of your taxpayers' money into a huge carbon capture project which will create green jobs. Well, that's what we're told. But when you look at Canada, you look at America and elsewhere around the world, you realise that no carbon capture scheme as yet has ever actually worked in any way at all. And I've been hearing about carbon capture for over a quarter of a century. And I really, really worry that this is £22 billion of money being spent ideologically with absolutely no evidence that it's going to work.
Welcome back. Let's talk about Tony Blair. When he was Prime Minister, he was obsessed with ID cards for all of us. He wanted all Brits to have ID cards. It was a big Labour flagship policy. They never got it through. Brits don't like the idea of it. He's still obsessed with it. He's still obsessed. He believes that we now should have digital ID cards that will be sort of chips, a government chip put into our phones. He says our taxes are high, our spending levels of public debt are high, outcomes are poor, so we spend more and more on the NHS than ever before, and the service is coming apart at the seams. We all agree with that. So I think there's a lot of inherent criticisms there in his successor, Keir.
Welcome. Are those MPs really going to think, we need to stick with the plan, we need to look at the kind of national picture, or are they going to do what unfortunately many MPs before them have done and just sort of give in to the
just bulldoze it through, or just give up?
Yeah.
And that's the problem. I mean, I was hearing over the course of the last few days there's already been loads and loads of development plans which have been approved by local councils, but the building has just never happened, and developing companies have just never built the houses.
No, exactly, and there's so many problems with the system, and again, like we talked about earlier, it's good that they're starting to sort of at least try to grasp nettle on this stuff, but I don't think you would need so much kind of commitment to this plan, MPs behind you, political capital, authority, all of that is kind of
And plus, as we said, the start, the actual physical people to build the houses, which we apparently don't have. We just don't.
Some other countries, they find alternative ways of keeping those people off the street and trying to rehabilitate them. I don't think our prisons are well run. I mean, if you visit prisons, you can see that there is flagrant corruption, there is drug and alcohol abuse, which is not being properly treated. There's radicalization by Islamist groups in our prisons. There's poor education. So there's a lot of work to be done. But I do think we should be putting more people behind bars, particularly career criminals.
It's what you said before we'd seen it. It's niche. It's just about this bunch of rich people playing this niche sport that nobody really cares about. And you think, well, a really skillful documentary maker might be able to do something with this. But Harry and Meghan, whatever they are, they're not skillful documentary makers. And this is just tedious. It's tedious.
Well, it's been made by the people who actually made the documentaries about Wrexham. So they are actually experienced documentary makers. But you've got to have a subject that is actually going to resonate with the outside the sport. And I know that every sport is looking and striving to find an audience outside its true supporter base. But this ain't going to do it for polo, because it's a crowded market. And I have to say, it is as dull as ditch water, and bits of it. I'm watching the last episode. In it, we do see Harry and Meghan